Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our full moon that is coming up this Saturday, December 18th. And it's going to be in sidereal Gemini in the star of Mrigasira. Mrigasira is this star that moves from Taurus into Gemini. It's often called the searching star, and its name indicates a deer's face. So we see this, beautiful face of a deer that is on the move somewhere, going somewhere. In the mythology, Mrigashira is the essence of Rohini, the star before her, that is needing to flee. She's the most beautiful of all the sisters, of all the nakshatras, and she's the most beautiful of all the daughters. So the sisters are the wives of the moon. They're also the daughters of the creator. And in the story, Prajapati wants to mate with Rohini of all of his daughters in order to create these beings on earth. And she doesn't want that. She wants something different. Oh, excuse me. So she turns herself into a deer and flees to earth in order to find something different. So we can see that in this star, we move from the second house, which the natural second house is Taurus, and that's the house of our values. It's our house of our family and our attachment to security. And it moves us into the natural third house, which is Gemini, where we use our ego, we use our will to learn new skills and to grow beyond what we were already taught. So this myth shows this. It's also moving us from this sort of earthy realm of Taurus into the more mental realm of Gemini, where ideas and new information can completely change our outlook on life. And as such, we see that what we think creates and shapes our reality. In the Taurus side of things, it's what we do, right? It's the physical earth element that is showing up. And this star, Mrigashira, is ruled over by Soma, who is both the god of the moon, so it's another name for Chandra, but he's also the immortal nectar, the juice of life that gives eternal life, right? This is the Soma is the drink that both the Devas and the Asuras want when they're turning the great Milky Way, and they are hoping for eternity, for eternal life. So there's a youthfulness to this star and a quality of being full of life and that juice of life. In Taurus, especially, we see that we're not just trying to survive, right? We're trying to thrive. We're trying to enjoy the beauty, enjoy the pleasure, find that taste, that rasa for life. And in the Gemini part of it, we might seek it through the mind and create new realities that are possible for us. That, of course, is where this particular full moon is taking place. And I'm going to share my screen so we can see our chart that we're working with. We can see the moon has just moved into sidereal Gemini, and the sun is across the way in Sagittarius, in the star of Mula. Mula is where we are pulling out by the roots. Mula is the root. And when we look at the movement through all the different stars, the 27 nakshatras, we see that we are coming from the portion of the sky where we were working with ourselves and others from Scorpio. And there's what we call a Gandanta, a break between the water signs and the fire signs. So when Scorpio ends with Jaista, it ends. And then Mula begins in Sagittarius. And in this place is one of the most, considered one of the most tumultuous places in the sky, is where we have the goddess Nariti, who's full of chaos. She is chaos itself. And in that whirlwind, that chaotic spinning, up comes out of the roots anything that is not really serving us in our higher purpose, our higher vision, our higher wisdom, and our higher truth, because Sagittarius represents those things. So on one end, we have us pulling things out by the roots. And in our moon, which is our mind and our emotions, our internal self, we're seeking a new truth. We're seeking where things could be right. So this dichotomy is very interesting. The moon also being in Gemini is representative of our knowledge, our information, our facts, our ideas. And the communication we have around that. Gemini is often a place where we have a lot of flexibility, where we're open-minded, where we have objectivity when we're receiving information, when we're putting it out again. We're sort of just information processors in Gemini. Oftentimes people who have their natal moon in Gemini will have a very hard time keeping their thoughts in line because there's just this constant flow of information, especially in today's society where there's so much stimulation, so much electronic use and the internet, right? So there's a constant source of information that we can fill our brains with if we want. Across the way in Sagittarius is where we have beliefs, we have ideals, we have principles, and we stand by that. So this axis is where we discover what our discernment looks like, which comes from Mercury, which comes from Gemini, or what our beliefs are and what we have faith in, which is what comes from Sagittarius. Ultimately, in order to have any kind of wisdom, we need both. We need to have taking in true information. We need to have discernment around that. And we need to recognize the world we're in as opposed to the world we want to live in. But we also need to be able to step back, see the bigger picture, see the world we're aiming for or the truths we're aiming for, and be able to take all that information and make it mean something. Oftentimes when people have heavy planets in Gemini, they can kind of just become information processors. They have trouble taking a stance or making a thesis or making something have a point. And when people have heavy planets in Sagittarius, they're all about making their points and their beliefs and their ideas, but they have a hard time being discerning when new information comes in or accepting new information and changing their views on things. So there can be a lot of confirmation bias in the Sagittarius realm. And we have just knowledge versus wisdom, right? Time-honored truths that will always be true versus information and facts and details that are just kind of true right now. And how do we work with those two fields to, again, create wisdom that accepts the here and now. So when we're dealing with actual humans and actual situations, we're not bypassing it. We're not just giving some spiritual, philosophy or maxim to kind of override that, but that we're also allowing for the fact that we can always reach for those higher truths and that those higher truths are there. And if we continue to live in the mundane world, we will never get there. So we need to have both. And we can see that the moon is, at this particular time of the full moon, the ascendant happens to be on this moon. So that's, in the moment of our actual full moon, excuse me, not new moon, we will have the rising sign at the same point as the moon, which is a powerful reflection in that moment. And it is powerful, especially for a full moon, because full moons are when the moon is going to keep moving, right? So a full moon is a marcation. A new moon starts off a whole cycle where the sun and the moon are joined in a place, and that's setting off the whole cycle of that path. The full moon is the apex. It's the period where we see that reflection of what the rest of the month carries. Recently, we've had our full moons when the sun is very early in the new sign. So we haven't had our new moon yet here in Sagittarius. We had our new moon eclipse in Scorpio on December 4th. So the cycle is actually starting with the full moon, starting with the reflection of the opposite of the thing. And then we're going to go into a month of that thing. And that thing being beliefs, ideals, and going out in the world and really understanding ourselves from a cultural, social, and philosophical perspective. Sagittarius is a fire sign that goes out into the world. So the rising sign does have some relevance here in this full moon, but not too much. So what does have a lot of relevance is that Mercury, the ruler of the moon, is joined the sun here right across the way. So it's giving reflection to this full moon, but it's also in its own state in Sagittarius. So while this moon is showing us that opposing way of being where we use information and we have objectivity and we're rational and we're thinking through things as opposed to feeling through them or believing our way through them, where we're trying to move away from our confirmation bias, the owner of this moon, the ruler of this moon, Mercury, is in the sign of confirmation bias and having those strong ideals and those strong philosophies. What happens when Mercury's in Sagittarius is often we're not discerning about information. We're not objective. We allow only the information in that works with what we already believe. And we're constantly making meaning of everything. So people who have Mercury in Sagittarius tend to stand on pulpits and preach quite a bit and have very strong beliefs about things where everything that comes in meets that information or that bias, but they're lacking some of the capacity to sort of have this objectivity and this neutrality when taking in information. So while the moon is reflecting to us that we should have that neutrality, the owner of the moon is also showing us that we don't have that right now, that that's not going to be a high quality running in this moment. And especially with Mercury being so close to the sun, it's still in combustion, right? He's in combustion when he's 12 degrees, when he's retrograde, and 14 degrees when he's direct. So he's within that 14 degrees with the sun right now. So we can see that also we have a part of us that doesn't feel heard, that's feeling like we're not actually able to fully get our words out because there's some authority or some power that is keeping that's not listening to us. And as a result, when we feel unheard, we often try to either make a joke about it. But when Mercury is in a place like Sagittarius, we could get kind of touchy and fiery with our beliefs around that and what we think should be different. So this is a time to be very aware of how fired up we can be with our beliefs and our communication, especially because we have this K2 Mars here in Scorpio. And I have done this, I did the report 2 weeks ago when we had the eclipse here, and I talked about Mars coming in. And then I did a write-up about that a few days ago when Mars and K2 were just about to go direct, just about to go into exact conjunction on the 13th, 14th, 15th, we started to really heat up. Actually, today is the 15th when there's the exact conjunction of K2 and Mars. So there's a lot of fire running already, a lot of fiery potential as all the shadow stuff comes up, as all these things that have been stuffed down in the corners and the recesses of our being personally, our social entity, our social being, maybe our smaller communities that we live in, maybe the bigger society that we all share. And then also, we could see this even on a geological level. So there's this quality of stuff coming up and out in a fiery way. And the quality of K2 and Mars joined together is very sort of militant and intense and aggressive. So we have to be aware of that also. And of course, where this falls in your chart is going to be very significant. So first of all, I'll have some links to this conversation. I had a conversation with my teacher, Sam, yesterday on this subject. We did a video on this, a live video for Facebook on the subject of K2 and Mars together. And at the time, the sun was still there, right? So the sun is now, by this full moon, going to be in Sagittarius. So it will have moved. And also that write-up I have. But if you're not already on my email list, you can sign up for that and also receive these forecasts for all 12 signs. I have one right now that's still coming out for Rahu in Taurus and K2 in Scorpio. So it'll show you where Scorpio is in your chart and what really is the lessons you're supposed to be learning in this eclipse cycle, which is going to be officially over March 17th. But this last eclipse we just had was really sort of the big finale that's carrying us out. It'll also show you what Mars has been doing for you in these past few months and ending with Mars moving into Scorpio. So still relevant in that way. And then Jupiter in Aquarius is the final report that you'd receive right away if you sign up for my email list. So if you're not already on that and you want to know what part of your life is being affected, is it your relationships? Is it yourself? Is it your career? Is it, your higher wisdom and teachings and teachers, then this is the kind of thing that will show for you. But anyway, this fiery energy of K2 Mars together is creating quite a lot of intensity and heat in our lives. And it's really within ourselves, right? It's our own emotional body that's experiencing this, or like I said, maybe the planetary emotional body or the social emotional body. And it's stuff that needs to come up and out, and it needs to see the light of day. And it also needs to be reintegrated in a way where it's not so cast out or feared, where there's a quality where we can actually fold it back in somehow and not just dislike what we see. Because a lot of times when we have things that happen to us that are negative, or there are negative interactions we have, or things that we just don't deal with in the moment, they do get kind of stuffed down into the shadows, and we don't deal with them. They morph into these crazy, huge dragons of terror that we have, and we hold so much fear around that. And no matter how scary of a dragon it really is, if it is to come up and out and be our worst nightmare and be exactly as horrible as we think it is, it's still going to be better up and out in the light of day and with lots of different eyes on it, being able to deal with it, than it is going to be trapped down in some sort of secret corner, where only, either no one looks at it or only a couple people are dealing with it in a state of sort of paranoia, trying to keep it a secret. Just by trying to keep things secret, they become dragons, right? Or dragons aren't the best word, because dragons aren't very frightening to me, but these, kind of monstrous entities that take on a life of their own. Just the nature of trying to keep something a secret or keep something hush hush creates that. And Scorpio is a realm of secrecy. It's a realm where we are hiding, just like a bug hides in the corner and waits till it's dark to come out when no one's around. That's what Scorpio really represents. We also have another thing that's sort of challenging our relational selves in this moment, which is that Venus is about to go retrograde. She's going to be retrograde. And I'm going to try to use this change time tool that sometimes gets me on this Parashara's light. But we see that Venus has now, by the time of this full moon, joined with Saturn in Capricorn. And the retrograde action starting on the 19th. So I'm going to cross my fingers and see if one day after this full moon I can get there. We have Venus retrograde as we move to the 19th, right? And this is about 3 weeks, I think we have Venus retrograde. So she's going to be moving back, and I kind of missed where that happened. On the 29th, we see, and it might actually be the 28th, because I have this at the time of the full moon, 6:35. We have Venus moving back into Sagittarius, right? So there's going to be this retrograde action that gets us back. So about 10 days after she begins retrograde in Capricorn, there we find her back in Sagittarius. And this will be lasting until about the end of January. I think it's like the 29th. The 29th is when she begins to be direct again. And at this point, she'll be halfway through Sagittarius. So this is, from this perspective, from this point of this full moon, it's going to be about a month and 10 days that we're going to have Venus retrograde. And you can see at this point that Mercury is actually retrograde, overlapping with Venus. So Mercury's retrograde cycle is, let me do the weeks actually. Mercury's retrograde cycle is starting about January 14th. So before Venus is finished, we'll have Mercury retrograde. And I'll talk about Mercury retrograde a little bit more closer to that time. I just really wanted to show Venus's transit and was able to do that. So the day after this full moon, Venus will be going retrograde, which on a bigger scale, on a scale of society, this has to do with our relationships. Venus is the relational planet. It's the planet of happiness. It's the planet of connectivity with others. So Venus going retrograde means we're going to have to run back over old ground with relationships. We're going to really maybe see previous partners or lovers come back into our lives, feeling like, oh, haven't I already done this before? This has already happened. Well, coupled with the explosivity of this current transit with K2 and Mars, we can see that that could even just be an instigation of itself, right? We have this sort of spiritually bypassing Mercury going on over here, and this, this quality of Sagittarius where we're riding the high and the philosophical plane, and then we have this old shadows and old trauma coming up out of the recesses of our being that's being explosive right now. And this is wreaking havoc on relationships. People have very real trauma within themselves, and we each have it like that. We sort of spiritually override ourselves sometimes. Sometimes we bypass ourselves and we're like, that's not that big of a deal, or whatever philosophy we might have that can kind of make it better for us. So we don't really always honor the trauma and pain we experience ourselves, first of all. And then we definitely don't do that for other people or for society as a whole. So we have all this like repressed shadow stuff coming up and out. But at the same time, the current transit, before when we had the eclipse, Mercury was also joined and the sun was also joined in Scorpio. So there was a lot more willingness to look at all of that. But now that Mercury and the sun have moved on, it's kind of like, oh, well, get over that, get over that. And here's a high truth and a nice, philosophy to make everything feel better. But in the meantime, relationships have been damaged in this and have been hurt in this time. And that running over old ground comes right on the heels of that. So we will experience our relationships being hit through all these different things. Now, if you are a Scorpio rising or an Aries rising, Venus is also your relationship planet. So it's the planet that rules relationships for you. If you are a Taurus or a Libra person, Venus is your identity. It's you. It's your own self in the chart. So you're going to be running over more themes that have to do with your own identity than your relationships. For Leo people, it's their 10th house, it's career. So it's going to be running over old themes in their career. So we have to always be aware that every planet works in a functional way for your chart. Whatever your rising sign is going to determine what area of your life is being affected by these transits. And furthermore, it's not just that, right? It's the Leo person here. Venus is their 10th lord and also their third lord, and it's in their 5th house and 6th house. So it's specifically their career going through the creativity and running back over creativity as it transits their 5th house. And as it begins, it'll start in their 6th house with the hard work that they have to show up for in order for their career and some of the enemies or debts or struggles they have in that. So that's, what it will specifically mean for that person. And I'm going to do a breakdown of Venus for all 12 signs as I trade out for the Mars report, because that is kind of just right now relevant. And we will, so I'm going to do a Venus breakdown of how this retrograde will affect all of the 12 rising signs. So if you do sign up for my newsletter, you'll get that in a week or so when I finish it, or a few days when I finish it, whenever I can get it finished. But if you sign up right now, you'll get both. You'll get the Mars report and then you'll get that Venus report when it does come out. I usually just do forecasts every 2 weeks, but when there's special transits or big transits that are happening with the outer planets, then I sometimes do special reports and send those out to my newsletter folks as well. So the thing we have right now that we're reckoning with more than anything is how to handle information versus time-honored truths and wisdoms. And how are we moving beyond and doing something different than we've done before, right? This is a lot of what we're working with in this full moon cycle. And even in the new moon cycle that will come in Sagittarius, that's going to be a lot of what's happening. But simultaneously, at the same time, we're dealing with a lot of old stuff. That eclipse was with the South Node, which is past karma, old karma. So a lot of what we haven't dealt with is coming up. And that's the stuff that needs to be pulled out by the roots, right? With this mula, we need to pull out by the roots things that aren't working, modes of operating that no longer function. Societally, we can see that. There are so many ways that we've decided to work that we somehow accepted along the way. And maybe somebody suggested it, maybe it came from a top-down position. More often than not, most of the structures we have in society were determined by people who benefited from those structures being in place. So we have to make choices and changes on a bigger collective scale in our smaller communities, in our smaller groups of people, in our families, and in our own person. We have to set new paradigms. We have to set forth on new roads, and it's going to require learning new skills, new information, new skills, new ways of doing things, not relying on the old way anymore. And it's going to require being open-minded and flexible and accepting that just because we have these very strong ideals and beliefs about things, we don't necessarily know the whole picture. Yet at the same time, we have to remember to hold to strong truths and to not allow information to take us so wayward that all of a sudden we have, an argument about something that's founded really on something pretty weak or shoddy. So we have to balance these things. And this is the big lesson of this time. The more we can balance our knowledge and our wisdom, the more we can have discernment around the information, the facts that we're taking in, and recognize that we live in a time where everything is really being sold to us. We're living at the height of capitalism in that sense, where every single person and thing feels like it's a sale, and we're so used to that. In some ways, we're almost immune to it. It's like we don't even notice it anymore. But for those of us who are kind of hypersensitive to it, we see it all the time and everywhere. We see constantly being sold something, or having something put in a certain light so that it will look more pleasant to us. So our powers of discernment are constantly being attacked in a way, because we're not being given clean information really ever. Most of the information we're given has a bent to it, and the bent is the person wants you to do something, usually buy something or whatever, but maybe believe what they believe, or think what they think, or get on board with them, or sign this petition, or join this group. Somehow justify their confirmation biases. They want other people to justify their own confirmation biases. So we're in a society where very, very few conversations actually are clean in that sense. Very few pieces of information we might read, media, anything is clean. Almost everything has a very strong agenda behind it. And that's from interpersonal relationships with individuals, as well as obvious forms of that, where we see, advertisements on TV, or, the news, or whatever other things we see that are very clear depictions of what I'm talking about. So discernment is not easy right now. It's very hard to have discernment. And it's constant that this advertisement is usually trying to grab us by the emotions, right? Trying to grab us in our emotions and in our confirmation biases that we already have. So the capacity to take that time to really find stillness within ourselves and find that discernment is going to be key right now. Like meditation is at an all-time necessary right now, both to calm down the fires of everything coming up and to really find acceptance for things as they rise, whether they are negative things that have happened to us, or whether they are things we view in a negative light that we've actually done to others. So that's another part of the shadow realm, is that we've all been both victims and perpetrators of various forms of trauma on various different people, and not just in this life, right? In our previous incarnations, and our family and our lineage has done this, and our groups that we associate with have done this. So we're in this situation now where there's a lot coming up, and we might have that instinct to kind of bypass it, and we might have that safety cling to the old ideas and the old ways of operating, and how can we keep things secret, or how can we not rock the boat too much, or how can we do this, how can we maintain the status quo, especially if we do okay in that status quo, if our life is pretty much okay in that status quo. But this moon is offering us that there's new ways, there's new skills we can learn, there's new information we could have. And it doesn't necessarily have to be explosive. It can be, but it can also just be adjusting our perspective and seeing things just slightly different, stepping a little bit to the different side, and owning a different reality than the one we've been accepting, condoning, and we condone it when we act within it for a very long time. And then, of course, Venus retrograde is going to bring up a lot of old stuff for all of us too. So it's the old versus the new. And how can we how can we use old information to create new paradigms? How can we use this stuff that's coming up in this past that we all hold and find a new way of doing it that does work? And as the sun transits out of Mula, it will go to where Mercury is, which is Purvashada. And this is where we really start to plant new seeds that function in a different way, in a way that are more aligned with our truth. That's the goal. And our truth might not be aligned. So we might be digging up holes for the rest of our life and planting seeds that we then realize didn't grow too well because we didn't do a good job, and we need to go back and do it again. This is a cyclical process. It's not like one time and it's all done, but we're in this cycle right now, uprooting with the sun, shining light on things that are needing to be uprooted. And our Mercury is already in that place where we're ready to start planting some new seeds and creating new visions for how our truths can be held in this world that we're living in, and how we can move the world, nudge the world to be more like what we want it to be, and less of the stuff that caused all the pain and trauma and suffering that's coming up to begin with. So I hope this is helpful for you. I went a little bit longer than I planned it to, actually, But I will have the links in here for the other articles and videos. And if you want to sign up for my newsletter and receive those personalized for all 12 rising signs reports, then please do that. It's at www.radhahomeyoga.com. And I wish you many blessings on this full moon in Gemini. Namaste.